When I started looking into this, I wasn't searching for giants. Really, I was mostly paying attention to odd things in architecture. Extremely tall doorways, staircases that felt way too big, cabinets and furniture that looked just a little oversized for a normal person. The kind of details you notice in old buildings and usually brush off with, "Okay, they probably built it that way for grandeur." At first, that's exactly what I thought too. Then I came across the photographs. Not paintings, not legends, not some story that got passed down and exaggerated over generations. Photographs, real photographs from the mid to late 1800s. Very tall people standing next to ordinary-sized people. At first glance, your brain wants to say, this has to be fake. But then you look closer, and the lighting is right, the shadows are right, the proportions are right. And on top of that, these images come from a time when making something like that convincingly fake was not easy at all. That was the point where something really shifted for me. From that moment on, the official explanations stopped sounding as convincing as they used to, and the more I looked, the more examples I found. Carte de visite from the 1860s, cabinet cards from the 1870s, giant-looking people who seemed to stand 8, sometimes 10 feet tall. And these weren't the kind of people you'd expect to see on a circus poster. They weren't being presented as sideshow attractions or as, "Look how strange this is." They just looked like normal people. They were wearing ordinary clothes for the period. They were posing seriously. A lot of the time, they even had family members of normal height standing beside them. If you look through the British Museum archives, there are similar examples there. The Smithsonian mentions some of this very briefly, but never really digs into it. French collections show the same kind of thing. Russian records also refer to unusually tall individuals. But the same pattern keeps happening every time. They get recorded, they get observed, they get labeled, and then they get put aside. No one really stops and asks, why? Why are there so many examples? Why do these photographs cluster so heavily between 1850 and 1900 and then suddenly disappear? Why do some accounts from that period describe these people not as bizarre curiosities, but as guards, protectors, overseers, foremen, people with serious functional roles? And then there's another side to this. The people in these photographs are usually standing in front of buildings, big buildings, and not just a little big. I mean buildings with doors that look absurdly oversized for a normal person, but suddenly make sense the second you imagine someone much taller standing in the frame. We've always been told these structures were designed for grandeur, intimidation, or just visual impact. But sometimes another thought starts to creep in. What if those proportions actually fit someone? And once you seriously consider that possibility, it becomes very hard to go back. After that, I started looking more closely at doorways in government buildings. The 1700s, the 1800s. Not just the main entrances, even the interior corridors are oversized. Some staircases are too tall for an average person to move through comfortably. Chairs, tables, beds. A lot of them aren't just slightly big, they're excessively big. Of course, explanations come quickly. Decorative, custom-made, built for someone unusually tall. But the real issue is that it isn't just one building. It's hundreds, maybe thousands. Courthouses in America, public buildings across Europe, state complexes in Russia, colonial buildings in India, public buildings in South America. Same general period, same strange proportions, same feeling that the scale is off. And we're told all of these were built that way purely for aesthetic reasons. But that never fully holds up. Because you say it's aesthetic, but the functional interior spaces are oversized too. You say it's grandeur, but the everyday corridors are oversized too. You say it's ceremonial, but the tables and chairs are oversized too. So eventually you're forced to ask, who were these buildings really made for? And that's exactly where Tartaria enters the picture. If that name doesn't sound familiar, here's the short version. Tartaria appears on maps from the 1700s and early 1800s as a huge region stretching across northern Asia. Not as some myth, not as a rumor, as a real geographic name. You see it in atlases, encyclopedias, and historical records. And then, at a certain point, it disappears. Not gradually fading out, more like it was removed. The maps change, the texts change, the name disappears. But the buildings remain. Enormous stone structures in Central Asia, Russia, Mongolia, strange oversized doors, echoing empty halls. And yet we still don't always have a clean, simple, convincing explanation for how all of that was built. And that is where a very strange possibility starts to open up. What if these unusually tall people weren't exceptions? What if they were part of a system? Maybe they belonged to a governing class. Maybe they were guardians, overseers, controllers. Maybe they were functional members of an ecosystem that today's historical narrative no longer includes. And maybe the architecture still carries traces of that system. That possibility starts to explain some things in a very unsettling way. Why the photographs look so formal, why these people seem connected to authority, why traces of them start fading after the 1890s, why the structures remain, but the people who used them get pushed out of the story. And at that point, the question gets bigger. If you wanted to erase a civilization from memory, wouldn't the first thing you remove be the most visible evidence of it? And the photographs aren't the only part of this. In the 1800s and early 1900s, American newspapers regularly reported discoveries of giant human skeletons. Not one or two isolated weird stories, repeated reports over time. In the New York Times, in local newspapers, in excavation reports, in railroad construction reports. And then those reports stop too, not gradually, suddenly. We're told some of those skeletons were sent to the Smithsonian. Then we're told they can't be found, that they were lost, misplaced, mislabeled, transferred without documentation. And what you're left with is always the same feeling, as if something first became visible and then was quietly made unimportant and buried in the dust of history. At that point, it becomes very hard not to think something bigger may be going on. Why would evidence of human variation be erased like that? Why would physical discoveries that challenge the normal version of human history disappear so easily? Maybe because those discoveries point to a social structure very different from the one we've been taught. The first possibility that comes to my mind is this. What if these giants weren't rulers? What if they belonged to a specialized class created for a specific role? Guardians, overseers, people involved in infrastructure and construction. Maybe their size wasn't symbolic. Maybe it was practical. Maybe some buildings were scaled to them because they were the people supervising, operating, building, or maintaining those spaces. And that suddenly makes some things easier to understand. It helps explain why certain public buildings feel so strangely oversized, while residential spaces look more normal. It helps explain why these people appear more often in formal settings. It even starts to make some construction mysteries feel a little less impossible, Because when we ask today, how did they move stones like this? Or, how were these structures built? If much larger and stronger people were involved, the problem doesn't fully disappear, but it starts to look a lot less absurd. And then another possibility follows. Maybe we're wrong about who built some of these buildings. Maybe we're confusing the people who originally created something with the people who later occupied it. Maybe the official narrative isn't based on the true past of the structure, but on a later ownership story. What affects me most deeply isn't even the evidence itself. It's the silence around the evidence. Academia doesn't seriously debate the giant skeletons. Museums don't put the photographs front and center. Historical institutions don't really go into the measurements or question the scale. Everything gets pushed quietly to the side. That might not sound like active censorship. It feels more like passive erasure. Questions that never get asked, dots that never get connected, things that get dismissed with interesting but not that important. But sometimes the real issue is exactly there. Why were there so many unusually tall people? Why were they photographed and then forgotten? Why does the architecture from this period look as if it fits their proportions? Why does all of this line up with the same period when Tartaria disappears? And why does the conversation shut down the moment you put those things together? I keep coming back to the photographs. Because these people do not look like monsters. They don't look like fairy tale characters either. They look like people. They have faces, clothes, families. They stand there and pose like anyone else. In fact, they look so natural that it almost feels like, at the time, no one even thought they needed explaining. But we turned them into something unexplained. First, we removed them from official history. Then we declared them impossible. Then we made the whole subject feel ridiculous to talk about. And maybe in the process, we lost more than just them. Maybe we lost something about ourselves too. Even today, we still walk through those giant doorways. We still use those oversized staircases. We still work inside buildings with strange proportions. We still see oversized furniture in museums. We still find oversized tools in demolition sites. But most of the time, we do not stop and ask why. Because to really ask that question, you have to accept that official history may not be the clean, straight line it presents itself as. Maybe we are living inside the remains of an older system we do not fully understand. Maybe the giants in those photographs were not anomalies. Maybe they were signs of a completely different kind of society. I found similar things in auctions too. Oversized furniture, not thrones, not ceremonial pieces, not things built just to intimidate. They look like everyday functional objects, except the measurements are clearly wrong. Seats almost twice the normal height. Very tall backrests, armrests that don't fit an average human body at all, and these get explained away immediately as decorative. But why would something like that be decorative in government buildings, offices, or courthouse waiting rooms? The same thing appears with tools, enormous wrenches and industrial-looking implements pulled out of demolition sites. They show real signs of use, so they aren't decorative objects. But by modern human standards, they are simply too large. And at that point, giant doors, giant chairs, giant tools, giant people, they stop looking like separate oddities. They start looking like a pattern. So who were they? Guardians of Tartaria? Members of a forgotten administrative class? Overseers of construction? Functional parts of a system we can no longer properly understand? I don't have a definite answer, but the questions keep getting heavier. And sometimes questions can tell you more than answers. Why does all of this evidence cluster in the same periods? Why does the architecture seem to support the scale of the people in the photographs? Why do reports of giant skeletons suddenly stop? Why do certain forms of advanced but forgotten construction also get pushed outside the narrative in the same era? When you place all of that side by side, it becomes very hard not to ask, what weren't we told? What did we inherit without understanding? When the maps were redrawn and these giant people were erased from history, what else disappeared with them? Maybe we don't remember, but the buildings might. The photographs might still be carrying what the encyclopedias erased. Maybe the evidence is still here. Maybe it's just waiting for someone willing to ask the questions no one wants to ask. Who were these giant people? Why did they suddenly disappear? And what disappeared with them that makes us still act as if they were never here at all?